The high school student sucked into another world he or she could never have imagined. What makes this specific trope so special or unique, or the lack thereof? Uniqueness. I don't know if that makes sense. What makes it special enough to become so important and almost a part of the medium itself? Even people outside of the anime world, I feel like, have a general idea that this is like a thing that happens in anime. Even friends that I know that don't watch anime, they always make fun of it because of this trope. I started writing novels that I actually came to a conclusion, sort of. At least one for me. Every story needs a start or an introduction. I feel like that's pretty explanatory. But this intro isn't just an introduction to the plot, but it's also the characters, the world, hell, even the soundtrack. Literally every aspect needs an introduction depending on the medium of story that you're telling. Alongside all of this, you also have to show how those things interweave and connect and will also prosper and build into something bigger that the audience will want to see or experience. That's why it's called the hook, because you need to hook the audience in so they don't leave. Before I started writing, I never gave much thought to the idea of introductions, and I kind of always just assumed they were easy. And I was wrong. It is significantly harder than I ever thought it would be. And probably one of, if not the hardest parts of writing a full-fledged story. The writer has to balance not only every single aspect of the story he's trying to tell to essentially promise to the audience that this is what's but also having to weave in exposition and things like that to also get the audience up to speed on how the world functions. And people really don't like exposition because it's just not how people talk. That's why in books, some people get away with, again, just basically having like the narrator. That's not how I like to write though. I like to actually use as little a narrator as possible and kind of let the world and the story and the characters speak for themselves. I've heard Brandon Sanderson, and from one of his lectures, he made a super interesting point that I've never really thought about before, and it's that it's easier, even in fantasy worlds, to just bring aspects from our real world and put it in there, and that basically the consumer of your media will sort of just be up to speed to an extent by default. When you make it easier to digest like that, obviously the amount of exposition you need significantly goes down, depending on how much or little you do, obviously. For example, one of my favorite animes is Re:Zero, or however the hell you say it. I don't know, there's always an issue. We enter the world through a modern day lens, where he's just like a high school guy, I think. Just like a kid. If you remove that, it doesn't change how great the show is, but it inherently puts a sense of relatability to him, where it's not like, oh, cute cat girl in Eorzea, like trying to jump into that head first. It's, oh, I'm just like this guy, let's see where he goes. And then it goes into that crazy fantasy world. We relate to these characters and Subaru because of how seemingly normal he is. Essentially, any of us can be him. And I think that's the reason why the trope works. It might sound surface level, and I guess it is to an extent, but I feel like it's more than that. At least in my head it is. At a fundamental level, we all can relate to that because we all were awkward high school kids at one point. I mean, I was in high school like 4 years ago, and I still feel like that sometimes. This trope doesn't work because audiences are just used to it, or because it's just relatable. It's the fact that the majority of the audience has that exact life experience, down to like a T almost. The more you look at why certain tropes exist and certain aspects of storytelling and famous ways to tell stories, I feel like a lot of it can come down to just psychology and how, as humans, we're all a lot more similar than we'd like to let on. The introduction is basically just a race to form a connection between your protagonist and your viewer. And there are ways to raise that barrier or lower it. And when you make a character seemingly so ordinary, your range of audience that will relate skyrockets. Then, obviously, conversely, the more relatable, the more boring it can seem. I definitely think there is an argument to say that this trope is overdone and stale, because it is. And I'm also not saying that this is the only way that writers can make people care about their characters in anime or in any form of storytelling. But what I am saying is that I feel like it gets a little too much flack. In my opinion, this trope is not as bad as people make it out to be. And as cringe as it sounds, I still watch anime that have these tropes, and it still hits for me. I still like it. But I was just watching Solo Leveling, the first season, and Yeah, as a skinny younger guy, it's easy to relate to him, where it makes me excited to continue watching for my future, for the future of people around me, for the future of people that are in high school and elementary school and junior high now. That anything really is in store for all of us. We have no idea what our stories will end up turning into. Hell, last year, I was living at my dad's house and I had no plan of moving out. And now I've lived in Austin, Texas, across the country from them for almost a year now. We have literally no idea. These forms of entertainment, including these tropes, are used as an escape for a lot of people, and myself included. I've been using anime, video games, movies, TV, books, anything, as an escape for as long as I can remember, and that is part of the reason why I got into writing. Watching these ordinary high school guys, that was me for a long time, get thrown into a fantasy world of magic, love, evil, good, like everything. It was a dream come true, basically. That's all I'd ever wanted. And as I'm recording this, I'm realizing more and more that part of the reason why this works is because it also throws in the idea of the main character having a quest, and that we all want a goal and a mission and something that to work for that is greater than ourselves. And I think these forms get that across significantly better than most people would let on. So the dream for a fantasy world to sweep us off our feet and thrust us into a quest is all I'd ever want. And I think if we actually look around at our world, we sort of live in that to an extent. We just don't like thinking like that because it doesn't feel the same. But again, we got weird beasts with wings flying around. We drink clear liquid that gives us life somehow. Pour that liquid also on the ground. If you put a seed in the ground, somehow a tree comes out of it, which then gives off oxygen, which then the sacs in our body inhales. Nothing makes sense in this world. It is all a fantasy, and it's amazing. Look around. Hell, I'm looking out my window right now, watching just trees sway in the wind, and it's beautiful if you actually take the time to look at it and think about what you're actually looking at. Take away the ordinary of, hey, I'm just looking at a tree, whatever, who cares? Literally seeing hundreds of green, I don't even know what leaves are made of, but those just flow in the wind. We kind of got it pretty good here. As simple as this trope sounds of the old high school kid thrown into a fantasy world, it makes sense why it exists. And I think it should continue to, because at the end of the day, look around. We're basically all just kids in a fantasy world.